The storm outside had begun long before the rain. It was already swirling inside her chest the moment she realized he wasn't coming back. She sat in the cafe, long after the other customers left, long after the soft golden lights dimmed into the bluish hush that signaled closing time. Only the clattering of dishes in the kitchen remained, echoing like distant thunder. Her hands trembled around a lukewarm cup of tea as she stared at the door, waiting for a man who had promised he'd never leave her waiting again. Yet there she was alone, exhausted, and trying to hold herself together before the world shattered one more piece of her heart. But just as she inhaled a shaky breath, ready to stand and walk away, the waiter who had been silently watching her with a mix of patience and worry untied his apron. The soft fabric dropped into his hand as he approached her table. He pulled out a chair slowly, gently, with an expression that was far too kind for a stranger who owed her nothing. And then, with a calm voice that carried a weight she didn't understand yet, he said the words that would change everything. "I'm not leaving you alone. Before we go deeper into this emotional journey, if you believe in kindness, redemption, and second chances, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to help our channel grow and reach more hearts like yours." He shouldn't have noticed her, not in a busy cafe, nestled quietly in a busy city, but he had again and again, without knowing why. She came every Thursday, always at the same time, always with that hesitant look, as if she expected disappointment to greet her at the door. Sometimes she carried flowers, sometimes a thin envelope, sometimes nothing but hope. And every time, he found himself slowing down just a little as he passed her table, wondering who could keep someone waiting with such carelessness. Her name was Elena, but he didn't know that yet. All he saw was a woman sitting at a table meant for two, her loneliness reflected in the window in front of her. And that night, as the cafe emptied and the lights flickered, he finally walked over, not because she needed him, but because something in her silence felt like a cry he couldn't ignore. She looked up at him with startled eyes, her lashes thick with unshed tears. She apologized quickly, saying she didn't mean to hold up the closing shift, but he shook his head with a gentleness that surprised even him. He told her she could stay as long as she wanted, and then, without explaining himself, he sat down. In that moment, she didn't know he was a billionaire. She didn't know he was a single father. She didn't know he had once made the same mistakes as the man who abandoned her that night. She didn't know he carried guilt like a second heartbeat, or that he had spent years trying to become worthy of the little girl who called him daddy. All she knew was that someone stated his name was Adrian Carver, a name that appeared in business magazines and financial headlines far more often than in small cafes. But he preferred anonymity when he could slip away from his empire, trading tailored suits for rolled-up sleeves and a humble apron. In the cafe his father once owned, the cafe had been his refuge after the divorce, after the custody battles, after the world learned that even billionaires could be broken by love. He didn't need the extra work, he didn't need the tips, he needed the simplicity, the grounding of doing something that mattered quietly. And perhaps that was why, when he saw Elena slowly unraveling behind her polite smile, something inside him recognized the familiar edges of heartbreak. She tried to explain why she was waiting, how she had come to meet a man she once trusted, a man who had taken not just her heart, but her hopes with him. She didn't say the whole story, but she didn't have to. Her trembling hands spoke loudly enough. Adrian listened. He didn't interrupt. He didn't judge. He simply stayed, offering the warmth of presence without asking for anything in return. When her voice finally cracked and she whispered, "I must look pathetic," he surprised her with a quiet shake of his head, saying softly that she looked like someone who had been strong for too long. Her breath faltered. No one had noticed that before. Over the next weeks, Elena kept returning, not for the man she used to wait for, but for the quiet company of the waiter who had sat down when the world walked out. She didn't know how deeply her presence affected him, how seeing her smile, even those small, hesitant smiles, lifted the heaviness he carried. He would watch her from behind the counter, feeling an unfamiliar warmth. Whenever she looked up and found him watching, she'd blush, he'd look away, and something gentle would grow in the silence. It wasn't romance yet, it wasn't even friendship, it was recognition. Two lonely souls who had forgotten what it felt like to be seen. Sometime Adrian's daughter, Lily, would be with him on the days her nanny had appointments, a small, quiet girl with big brown eyes and a pink ribbon always in her hair. She never spoke much, but Elena noticed her immediately. One afternoon, when the cafe was buzzing with after-work crowds, Lily dropped her crayon. Elena picked it up and returned it with a small smile. Lily stared at her for a long moment before reaching out and placing a second crayon in Elena's hand, a gift, a silent thank you, a child's way of saying she felt safe. And that was when something changed in Adrian. He had never seen Lily warm up to a stranger so easily. He had never seen her give away anything of hers Even to children her age, he watched Elena interacting with his daughter with sincerity, with gentleness, with a quiet care that reminded him of something he hadn't felt in years. Hope the day everything shifted began like any other. Elena walked into the café, greeted by the aroma of warm pastries and the soft hum of conversation, but as soon as Adrian saw her, he realized something was wrong. Her face was pale, her eyes glassy, her hands visibly trembling. She tried to smile, but the effort faltered. He came to her table without thinking, asking if she was all right. She opened her mouth to speak, then suddenly broke into tears she couldn't control. Through gasping breaths, she explained that she had received a message that morning. The man she had been waiting for all those months had contacted her again. He needed help, money. She had given him so much already, her savings, her trust, her dignity. But he wanted more, and the worst part was that a part of her still felt responsible for him. Adrian felt something break open inside his chest at her words, not anger at her, but at the pain she had been conditioned to accept as love. He sat beside her, not across from her, beside her, shielding her from the curious glances around them. He told her, gently but firmly, that she deserved better. She deserved safety, respect, peace, and that loving someone didn't mean destroying yourself for them. Elena covered her face, overwhelmed by the kindness in his voice. Kindness she didn't believe she deserved, but he did something then that surprised both of them. He reached out and placed his hand over hers. His touch was warm, steady, grounding, and then he said the words that would stay with her for months. I'm not letting you fight this alone. He helped her block the man's number. He connected her with a lawyer who specialized in emotional and financial manipulation cases. He made sure she wasn't harassed again. He checked on her not as a savior, but as someone who genuinely cared. Slowly, she began to heal. Slowly, she began to trust again. Slowly, she began to see Adrian not as a stranger who once sat at her table, but as someone who consistently showed up quietly, gently, without expecting anything back. And then came the day she learned the truth quite by accident. The day Lily left her small backpack open on the cafe counter. A security badge had slipped out, embossed with a corporate logo. Elena recognized instantly one of the largest conglomerates in the country. Adrian wasn't just a waiter. He wasn't struggling. He wasn't ordinary. He was the billionaire owner of the company she had admired from a distance. For years, Elena felt betrayed. At first, not because he lied, but because she thought she had leaned on someone she could never belong beside. She withdrew suddenly, afraid of the class difference, afraid of expectations, afraid of being a burden. Adrian noticed her pulling away, and one evening, after the cafe emptied and Lily sat drawing quietly in the corner, he approached Elena slowly, gently, like someone reaching for a fragile truth. He told her he hadn't lied. He had simply chosen to be himself around her, not the man the world expected him to be. He told her that the version of him she saw, the one who stayed with her when she needed someone, was the truest part of him. And then he said, I don't want you to disappear, not when I finally found someone who understands the parts of me no one else sees. Tears filled her eyes, not from fear this time, but from something tender, trembling, and terrifyingly hopeful. Their connection grew quietly, like dawn creeping across a dark horizon. Elena found herself becoming part of their small world, helping Lily with school art projects, sharing homemade pastries with Adrian, laughing softly at his clumsy attempts at lady art on dull mornings. Lily adored her, Adrian trusted her, and Elena finally allowed herself to want something she had once sworn off completely: a family, a place where she belonged, a love that didn't hurt, but the past rarely lets go without one last strike. One evening, as the cafe was closing, the man she once waited for appeared at the door, angry, desperate, demanding. He approached her with wild accusations, cornering her, insisting she owed him more money. Elena froze, shaking. Adrian stepped between them instantly, his voice calm but deadly serious. He made it clear that Elena was no longer alone, that she would never again be threatened or manipulated. The man left in a rage, but not before Elena realized just how deeply Adrian cared for her that night. As the rain fell softly outside, Elena broke down in Adrian's arms, sobbing in relief and fear and gratitude all at once. And he held her, not like a savior, not like a billionaire, but like a man who loved her. Months passed, their bond deepened, not through dramatic confessions, but through everyday moments, quiet dinners, shared responsibilities, gentle reassurances. Elena learned what real safety felt like. She learned how to trust someone who showed up day after day. She learned to smile without guilt, and Adrian, who had once vowed never to risk his heart, again found himself imagining a life where Elena was part of every morning, every evening, every tomorrow. One evening, he closed the cafe early. He brought out the same chair he had pulled out the first night they truly met. Lily placed a hand-painted card on the table that read, "Stay with us," and Adrian, with a tenderness that made her heart ache, repeated the words that first saved her. I'm not leaving you alone. If this story touched your heart, please like, share, comment, and subscribe to support the channel and help more viewers discover stories filled with hope and healing. Before we end, I have a special request. Comment below with one word that describes how this story made you feel. Thank you for watching, and remember, no matter how dark things seem, kindness can change everything.